that whole area around Four Corners, and you could live lifetimes there and still have places that you need to go check out.
There are a lot of hidden things
Yeah.
in the Southwest. You might have heard the story of Lost City in the Grand Canyon. This has been kind of the subject of a lot of internet posts, but it has a grain of truth to it, and it's a very interesting story. If it's just a story, then it's just kind of a fascinating tall tale of the Wild West. It happened in 1909. There was a man named Kincaid, G.E. Kincaid, and he was hired by the Smithsonian to go on this expedition down the Colorado River. And he started at Green River, Wyoming, and floated in a small boat down the Colorado, and he went all the way to Yuma, Arizona in this boat. And there was a place in the Grand Canyon that he supposedly discovered, a tunnel in the Grand Canyon. And there was a passageway going into the side of Grand Canyon. It was like 10 or 12 feet wide. There was an article in the Arizona Gazette that described what he found. That's the Phoenix newspaper at the time. It's the April 5th, 1909 issue. But he found a lot of artifacts. Some were made of copper. He found swords and weapons, and some supposedly urns made of gold. Found evidence of smelters where they actually made these swords and weapons and so forth. There was a room where he found a number of mummies stacked up against the wall. He estimated that 50,000 people could live in this complex because it was very complex. I mean, yeah, there were different, like a main dining hall and cooking utensils he found. He even found a statue of a Buddha in a lotus posture. Now, this was 2,000 feet up above the riverbed, and it's a number of feet down from the rim of the canyon. So it's very hard to get to this spot. People still claim that they want to go and look for this, but it would be very hard to find this place again. And it's my theory that the Smithsonian, if they found these artifacts, they came in for a second expedition and they cleared everything out of this cave, this complex. It might be sitting in some warehouse just like the end of an Indiana Jones movie. To find all these mummies and a Buddha and all this stuff, it would completely destroy the paradigm that early 20th century archaeologists were living under. Essentially that there is no pre-Columbian contact between the old world and the new for Columbus. The Egyptians did not come over here. Chinese did not come over here. No one came over here until Columbus, or maybe the Vikings, grudgingly say the Vikings showed up in Newfoundland, that area. But they, that Native Americans were isolated on this continent until Columbus came. This evidence would completely destroy that particular archaeological paradigm. To find these artifacts that are obviously, to find a Buddha, for instance, in the Grand Canyon, that would completely destroy
So much
the
for that theory.
timeline or anything. But, a lot of people have said that they want to go there, but very dangerous. And it's down the side of a cliff. I think that they cleared out the artifacts and maybe they dynamited the entrance to the cave, to the passageway.
That sounds like something that people in power would do.
Yeah. It's something maybe to think about. People have written about this before, and maybe someone wants to take up and do a thorough study of this whole matter.
Yeah, definitely heard fleeting wisps of there being some kind of underground city in the Grand Canyon a few times.
The last time I saw an elder up there on Hopi named Martin Gashwesioma, he's one of the last spiritual elders up there. And he asked, well, did you find the caverns yet? He truly believes, in that these existed, that there were caverns there. And the Hopi myths talk about this, the Hopi people coming up from the underground subterranean places, assisted by what are called ant people. You might have heard.
I was just actually looking at the ant people of Orion.
Oh yeah, that's I got interested in this because I found these petroglyphs in northern Arizona. They look insectoid. These creatures They were carved in stone. They kind of looked like what could be considered ant people. And, the Hopi have specific legends about ant people. I mentioned before the destruction of the three worlds. The first by fire, the second by ice, and the third by a flood. Well, these ant people supposedly assisted the Hopi in the destruction of the first two worlds, in that they took them down into caverns and they protected them from these earth changes in these caverns. And they taught them how to sprout beans. And every year on the Hopi, there's a bean dance commemorating the time when the ant people um, took them down into the caverns and helped them survive these major cataclysms.
Wow.
Interesting little linguistic thing. The Hopi word for ant is called anu, A-N-U. The Hopi word for friend is called naki.
Yeah.
So if you put it together, the Anunnaki,
Anunnaki.
the same as the Sumerian people, the Watchers that came from the skies and mated with human women. So I don't know if this is true or not. Just a coincidence, maybe, but
It's interesting coincidence if that's what it is. Another one is the Hopi stone tablets. What are the Hopi stone tablets?
well, supposedly when the Hopi came up from the Grand Canyon, they went and they met Masao, the god that I talked about before. Masao gave them a set of stone tablets, and this was essentially the deed to their land. And if you look at various renditions of the stone tablets, you can see various symbols that have been interpreted in different ways. And Grandfather Martin was in possession of one of the Hopi stone tablets called the Fire Clan tablet. Um, I'm kind of leery about discussing them because they've been seen by so few people. Grandfather Martin has a copy of this Fire Clan tablet, which he's supposedly there's been a lot of dissension on the reservation. And some years ago, the original was taken from him, but he has a copy of it. So there's a lot of nefarious things going on right now.
Right.
And this might have to do with the end of the fourth world. But anyway, these stone tablets had been seen by very few people. Frank Waters, who wrote a classic book on the Hopi called Book of the Hopi, he supposedly, he wrote about them, but he was relying on his informant named White Bear Fredericks. He only saw one of these tablets. There are 4 stone tablets. He only saw one of them, and he was relying on the description of his informant for this. And he kind of interpreted it in a certain way. There was another anthropologist in the 30s called Mishka Itidieff that saw one of the stone tablets. In a book, he published this tablet they had seen, one side of the tablet he had seen. And it's different from the one that Frank Waters published. So it's very hard to get a coherent view of the meaning and the symbols that are on these stone tablets, because they may or may not be what was actually on these tablets. And the Bear Clan tablet is supposedly being held by the Bear Clan, but nobody knows where it is, and it's not being publicized or anything. So it's really hard to get an idea of what they mean. But basically, they're supposed to be kind of like maybe a map of the land and a deed to the land that was given to the Hopi by Masao.
Interesting. God, I had 2 questions going through my head at the same time. The one that stuck was for those that don't know, what is a kiva?
A kiva is a subterranean prayer chamber. Originally, kivas were round. The kivas to the east of the Hopi tend to be round. Like if you go to Chaco Canyon, the big ruin there called Pueblo Bonito, and there's another one called Chetro Kettle. You see these round kivas, and you see them also in places up north, the Aztec National Monument. You see round kivas, and in southwestern Colorado, you see round kivas. I don't know, was there any kivas at Hovenweep? Did you?
I'm trying to think. I don't remember there being any. No, there were lots of square buildings. You could see where there was wood where it could have been like anywhere from 4 to 5 stories. But of course, the wood in certain places has, you know, gone, and that story has fallen in. But lots of square tower type places. I don't recall a kiva.
The kivas to the east tend to be round, and if you get into Hopi country, they tend to be rectangular. And this is explained by the fact that the rectangular shape was influenced by the Kachina cult, and they had, rectangular village plazas and so forth. So this whole idea of the rectangle came into fashion. But the function is basically the same. It's going into the earth. You get into the kiva using a ladder from the roof through a hatchway. And you go down, and it's a symbolic going into the Mother Earth, going into the womb of the Mother to pray. It's completely different from of the medieval cathedrals that these spires go up into the heavens, and you're reaching upward. But the kiva, you go downward into the Mother, Great Mother, and ceremonies are held there. Men used to go down there and do weaving in kivas, because the men are in Hopi. The men are the weavers, and the women are the potters. So the Hopi used to go down into the kiva and weave blankets. But it's it's the site of ceremonies, secret ceremonies for the most part. The kiva is basically a prayer chamber. I call it a prayer chamber that you go down to pray and do the ceremonies.
Kind of like in BC, they have like pit houses.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the Maya have a similar structure, uh, kind of like sweat lodge.
Yeah.
Uh,
Are they strictly for ceremonial purposes, or did they use them as living spaces?
they weren't living spaces, but the men kind of went down in there quite a bit. It was kind of a male sort of thing, almost like a fraternal feeling that you get when you go into the kiva. Um, but it was separate from living spaces. But I should say that the interesting thing about the kiva hatchway is that you look up through the hatchway if you're down in the kiva, and the ladder is sticking up through the hole. The Hopi used to synchronize the winter solstice ceremony by the appearance of Orion in this hatchway. The winter solstice ceremony is probably one of the most important. It's the first ceremony of the year, and it starts the ceremonial cycle. And Orion would appear overhead in the hatchway, and then they could start this winter solstice ceremony, which kind of is contradictory because the solstice involves the sun. The sun is at the farthest south it will be during the year, and then starts creeping back north. Every day it rises, you can see the sun is coming north on the horizon, rising a little bit farther north every day. So it's interesting that they would synchronize the ceremony. It started in the middle of the night, not at sunrise, but in the middle of the night, with Orion being framed by the hatchway of the kiva.
A starry people.
Oh yeah, they're very earthy people too, but they have a lot of connection to the celestial
Yeah.
realm.
I sure am glad that we had this opportunity to share this morning. But
It's been a great chat, George. I really enjoyed it. It's very enjoyable. And if anybody wants to go to my website, it's theorionzone.com. There are links to my books there. You can find my books on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. You can find out more information. I've got a lot of information. I have a page with just maps on it that shows this Orion correlation. So there's a lot of information on the website you can check out.
and that's ORIONZONE, the orionzone.com.
Exactly. Very good.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks for taking the time to share some of your sacred space with our sacred space.
Well, thanks, George. Take care now.